Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is Monday, November 4th, 2024, 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room. Please note we had orientation for new board members at 4:30 p.m. in the district office conference room this evening. I'd like to welcome everyone in the audience tonight. Thank you for joining us. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Does the board wish to declare any conflicts of interest? Any conflicts of interest? Any conflicts of interest? If not, moving on to school board norms. Steve, would you please read the school board norms?
The board developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with united voice once a decision has been reached, execute all duties of the school board in compliance with North Dakota Century Code, properly prepare for meetings, and commit to assessing board effectiveness and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Steve. We have nothing under public communications. For the consent agenda, is there a motion? Motion by Steve, is there a second? Second by Dan, we have a motion, a second. Would anyone like anything removed or any questions on anything? If not, we have a motion, a second for approval of the consent agenda. Assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving into our regular meeting, we have nothing under recognition or correspondence. Under reports, student council report. Please come forward and tell us your name.
I'm Hattie McDonald, a senior at JHS, and I'm also the president of student council. So far this year, we have had homecoming, which had a great turnout. Our dance was on the same night as the game, and many students attended and said they had a lot of fun. We have began preparing for our student council convention in December, which we will attend in Bismarck, and we also have started preparing to go for our snow week in January. But so far, the biggest thing we have planned has been homecoming. So do you guys have any questions regarding anything I just said?
Any questions from the board?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate you coming and sharing that information for us. Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have the James Valley Career and Technology Center quarterly update. Mrs. Eckert and Mr. Gaylor.
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Leck, for inviting us to talk a little bit about this project today. I'm Adam Gaylor, JVCTC Director.
And I'm Heidi Eckert, the Assistant Director at the Career and Tech.
And there we have duplicate. All right. Okay, so we thought some images would help with this process. For Heidi and I, having a few construction projects that we've been involved in, we really want to just start out and say that we appreciate Dr. Leck and Mrs. Grounds and Mr. Wagner and all of the support that we've had, both in the development process and the board in the initial feedback and the grant writing. It's been really exciting to get into this and start to see some of those ideas actually come forward. And so we're excited to give you an update and excited to see where the next few months take us in these projects as well. The three parts of the project that we plan to update on today are just the Child Care Center, which has got the most progress. The next major project, which will be the Building Trades Edition, and then we'll update you a little bit on the collaboration with the Arts Center for culinary arts as well. So we'll start out with the Child Care remodel, and Mrs. Eckert, if you want to just talk them through a little bit of the kind of the timeline. I'm going to just go over really quickly where we're at with the overall project. Just to remind everybody, this is part of our capital projects plan, but only after the board had approved here that we would take some of those funds and shift away from other parts of the project, about $173,000. That was what we used for the matching portion, and then we matched into a $500,000 RWIP grant. So when you look at the list of partners, that's the explanation of this. JPS contributed to the original capital projects grant. JVCTC had funds dedicated to that. Jamestown Stutzman Development Corporation, and then the RWIP grant, all together were partners in making this happen. And I think Dr. Leck has said several times that without that RWIP grant, the scale of this certainly doesn't happen, and the timing of it certainly doesn't happen. And we appreciate the board's support because we feel like this is a huge, it's a linchpin issue in our community, and going to be a huge opportunity for us as a center and a district to have this. We've been hitting our milestones. That's what they call this in the RWIP grant process. And so we finalized those architectural drawings in May. We did June bids, and they started demolition very shortly after we had the contract acceptance on the bids. And then July, they started really the construction to make sure that we had at least one classroom ready for the school year. So when we hit those timelines, then we were able to request some of the funds. We had the initial disbursement of $125,000, and we've got our application in for the remaining $375,000 for our WIP. So we're well on track with the grant and the project overall. A pretty substantial renovation, 10,593 square feet at the CTC. And you guys are welcome to come see that anytime.
And then like Adam mentioned, we started about July with construction. So while we were there over the summer, there was a lot of jackhammering going on and stuff getting piled out of the back rooms, and billows of drywall, dust making their way throughout the halls. It has really come a long ways, in my opinion, in a short amount of time. Just gave a quick tour today, and the ceiling tiles are in almost all the classrooms, not all of them, but most parts. Lights are in, flooring is in, walls are painted. Just waiting for some of the bathroom fixtures to get put in, and a few other windows. Windows also, I saw those were getting put in today, so they're getting really close on where we want to be.
Kind of next steps for us will be to outfit that space. We actually were able to secure some of the equipment last spring because we had some dollars left in Carl Perkins. We wanted to make sure we maximized that, so we anticipated needing to buy some equipment. We'll need to purchase some additional equipment. We've already been working with Mike on Mr. Armitage on the security and the safety and the installation plan for cameras and access control and that sort of thing. And then a companion project of our other addition, which we'll talk about next, is the playground portion of this. And so that'll include some concrete. You can see that just in the top right corner of the design. There's some concrete that goes around the playground space so that they have a track for different types of activities, and then it'll all be fenced in. So the drop-off is really, there's two secure access points. There's the gate to get into the playground, and then the doors to get into the childcare. And we anticipate needing to get that part of the construction rolling really early in the spring, as soon as the frost comes out, to make sure everything is set up for licensure, so that we can showcase that for licensing as well. The building trades expansion or shop addition, as you guys know, there's a domino effect. As we create this space, we open up other spaces within the CTC well, we have current program needs with things like welding and foundations of auto that are pretty tight in their space, and then building trades is very tight in its space. And so we're excited to have this expansion or addition going on. It's not an addition to the building. We went with a freestanding structure, both for the economics of not tying in, but then also for the lifespan of the structure as well, not tying into the original building. Inside, you can see that it's a big space, 7,300 some square feet overall. There's really sort of a two-bay concept within this. At the top of the screen, you can see one of the bays and that includes the classroom, office space, and some restrooms. Learned a lot about restrooms and code, and trying to meet what the instructor's preference would be, and thinking about what is this space going to be now and what could it be in the future, and making sure we weren't pigeonholing ourselves into anything in particular. One of the things we learned in our recent CTE audit is you never have enough storage. Well, not audit, but our vision visit. And so we wanted to make sure there was enough storage. So rather than losing space, we made mezzanine areas on top of the classrooms, bathrooms, office, and then also mezzanine areas on top of the spray room and mechanical room and the tool storage in there. And so trying to envision flexible use for these spaces, plenty of storage, classroom space, everything that we could think of. Had a lot of great feedback from Bob, our instructor, and he has done a great job. He's got an extensive construction experience as well, and so that's been really helpful in the process. Anything you want to add on the design?
No, just with the design, I know the students, I mean, this is what this will be used for, are really excited to be able to have part when it gets to the finished product where they can help design and where items should go and the tools and what it should look like. So they're excited to take part in that, so appreciate it.
The design process, maybe. Yeah, they'll be doing the interior construction, yeah. Except, they can't do the electrical or the hookups. They can run some of the plumbing, but they can't hook it up and that sort of thing.
And that was
So-
kind of an interesting point too, when you just have blueprints and you're looking at the design. I mean, Mr. Thorson, like Adam said, has had a great input into it. There's a lot of stuff you wouldn't think about, like, oh, we need a drain tile. And he's like, no, we don't want that because we're doing buildings and we have to have precise measurements. We're not going to have stuff that's going to be melting that we're driving in and needing to wash. It needs to have a flat floor. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. We would not have known that. The architects would have had a different
A
design.
drain
we
in there,
wanted.
yeah.
Mhm. And then same thing with outlets, like there's a lot of power tools and whatnot that they need in the construction site, but yet you don't want your cords in the way. So there's a lot of planning that I guess we weren't aware of, but now we're way more aware of what's going on into the building.
Dust collection, we learned about dust collection and the advances there. So it's not just Bob's 5-gallon bucket catch anymore. We'll have some dust collection that will help a lot with that. And the types of projects they're doing, inventing for the spray room, and it's pretty exciting. It'll be a state-of-the-art construction tech facility. Again, we had partners. This was through the Capital Projects Grant, solely funded through that, and so we had the same partners that we had listed before. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about timeline and what's gone on?
Sure. So timeline-wise, as you can see up on the board, we're getting really close. We're just about to that November part. So bids should be going out in the next couple of days. So we're excited to get to that point. And then construction-wise, we have spring 2025 as soon as we can, and the weather cooperates. So hopefully we have a mild winter like we had last year, but no guarantees. That's what we'll be looking at with those. But all of the projects that Adam's talking about, we're looking at today, we're hoping by 2025, the fall, that we will be in the building using those facilities, which is exciting when you think about it. It's a pretty quick turnover to get where we are.
We're hoping for, competitive bids, and so, as far as we know, it's good timing to be able to get on people's radar. We're early enough in that process. So if you know people that might be interested in bidding it, like Heidi said, it should come out in advertisements this week. So the Culinary Arts Partnership with the Arts Center, there's been, obviously they're a partner with it, and it's also a part of our Capital Projects Grant for board members that maybe came on new. When we wrote that into the original grant, we had anticipated locating that in our transition house, which is next to the CTC. And space-wise and from a community partnership standpoint, it made a lot more sense to partner with the Arts Center, who along the same time frame was looking at something like this. And so that partnership has gone really well. Their board has been very involved in the details, as well as Mindy Schmitz, executive director there, in the details. and what they desire, and we've had a lot of input from other culinary arts programs around the state. They went and looked at some other programs in the state to try to determine what types of equipment we wanted. Our part of the partnership is really the furnishing the equipment and the installation of that equipment. So we had a kind of a budget in mind for that, based on the original bids that we had looked at way back in December of 21, I think was the time frame, and so we had an inflationary impact to adjust that, and then we have an amount that we're contributing towards the project. The Art Center had some feedback on some additional items that they felt like they needed, and so if the bids come in over, they've had that discussion they'll need to evaluate that as well. But it's going to be our project to bid the equipment and installation. They are taking care of the design and construction portion of that. And then we have that MOU that you guys approved in August, I believe, that kind of governs how we work together on that. That again has been a design process, a lot of meetings to discuss that. That's going to be finalized, and we'll actually be able to advertise those bids in November as well, and then receive bids in December. And I asked Dave Hillerud, who's involved in coordinating that for the Art Center, about that substantial completion date, and he had said that was in the timeline they were looking at as well. So in the coming months, you may see a request for a new course for culinary arts, and then a corresponding maybe part-time position that we'd want to advertise for to hopefully get that program up and rolling along the same time frame that the construction is done. It's just some elevations of the equipment. These are all two-dimensional. We don't have a three-dimensional. We didn't pay for that part of the design, but pretty industry standard equipment, and it's going to be a neat space. It looks a little bit tighter than it actually is. You know, we're anticipating smaller enrollment classes. It's a lab class, and for CTE, for safety purposes, we'd be looking at around 12 students in a class like that, but pretty high impact for those 12 students, obviously, and that met the needs of the Art Center as well. Do you guys have any questions on any of our designs or progress? Anything we can update you on?
And Jason?
Back to the, excuse me, childcare remodel. Hard to tell from the diagram. The slide where you have your pictures, I noticed where the main access is on where the loop is. There will be no public access. That will be designed strictly as a childcare access or entrance, correct?
Yeah, that's where we anticipate our drop-off and pickup will be. And that loop design is really going to serve very well for that purpose. It was originally, I think, a bus loop, and we just don't have those needs for the bus drop-off the way that they have a need for.
And then actually, and I guess my question is the childcare going to be somewhat more secure maybe than the rest of the building type question?
Sure.
Did that make?
The top picture, or you were just
Well,
at,
either
sorry.
one.
Yeah, either one. The top one, that is the image. You can see the door at the end. That'll be a secure entrance. That's from the interior of the Career and Tech Center. So that'll be locked and only access through the security system, and then the access that Adam just showed.
So it's kind of the child care center within the corner of the center. Yep.
And the building lent itself well to that setup.
Questions on the culinary arts side of it. What's the square footage of that facility that's being?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I'll find that out for you.
Okay, and then now that one is truly a partnership between JPS and the community and everything. Do we have a summary or a picture of what that overall program would look like from a culinary arts for the CTC, and then as well as the community offerings that the Art Center is going to be putting together? Because I know that was kind of something that was in work when we originally approved this, and I was just wondering if they have a better idea of what the overall culinary program is going to look like at that facility.
I know we can provide, what the course description is going to be and kind of what we envision that space being used for. When I talked about a part-time position, a model that has worked in the state is to find a local chef or culinary arts expert that is willing to contribute 2 hours a day, essentially a block class. Typically, it's in the morning. And so our utilization of that space would be something with that. We also, think that the location next to the middle school might have some potential use. And then Lori Hare, our FACS instructor from the high school, has also asked about, rotating through and using that space because it has different levels of equipment than what she has in the home kitchen there. Use cases for the art center, they have classes that they run, but they also anticipate that they'd be able to open that up for community use if somebody was going to do something maybe value added and make jam out of local plums or something. They could use that for because it is an inspectable kitchen when it's all said and done. We've talked about the opportunities for catering types of events as well. Some of those culinary arts programs, once they get up and rolling, are able to do things like that. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Highlighting more the holistic benefit to the overall community, not
sure.
just the CTC side of it and what we're
Yeah.
doing from a curriculum, but also what is the art center going to be able to do and adding value to the community just from the sake of having these facilities available and doing classes for other members of the community that wouldn't otherwise be able to be offered.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of adult classes that they do currently, and they'd like to expand that. That's an attractive space to try to expand that.
Dr. Leck?
If I may with that, I would suggest that either at some future meeting or maybe at our next progress monitoring, we invite Mindy Schmitz from the Art Center to come and talk about because you're absolutely right, there's a partnership opportunity here, and we want to make sure the community understands our side of that partnership, but also the community good that's going to come from this collaboration. A huge leverage point for our community, much like the partnership at the University of Jamestown has been in providing shared facilities. So I think having Mindy come and talk about what those programs are, what their vision is for that space, what additional opportunities will be provided to the community would be a nice way to tie the two together.
Any other questions from the board? Good. Okay. All right, thank you. And I do think at some point we may want to do a tour with the board when it gets to a point where we think that it'd be a good time. I think we should, like prior to a meeting or something like that when we've done that with other facilities. So.
Well, just a thought, maybe we should have one of our next few meetings in the CTC conference room. It would be a little tight there, but it would allow us an opportunity to tour. So maybe we can consider that and how that might work and when that might work best.
Okay, we'll work with you two and see what would be a good point to showcase where we're at with it as well. So, thank you. Any other? Did you have anything else to add?
No,
No?
I think at the next board meeting, we'll have some updates for you relative to the child care and some anticipation of what we plan to do with rolling out applications for a committee that will kind of help steer some of that for employees, and then also maybe some position descriptions to have a first reading on, and preliminary budget numbers and that kind of thing.
Great. Dr. Fleck?
If I may, one more comment. I just want to recognize Teresa Olson, Heidi Eckert, Adam Gaylord. I don't know if anybody could really realize how much work has gone in to studying this issue. I've kind of tongue-in-cheek said before that maybe the only industry more regulated than public education appears to be childcare. And they are learning so much about starting this process, what we need to be doing, You know, a great appreciation because they're meeting and talking about this a lot. There's a lot of foundational work that's gone on behind the scenes by those individuals. And when this program gets up and running, which I'm very excited about, I think our staff is really excited about, our community is excited about, but it will be the product of a lot of work from those individuals. So I just want to make sure that we recognize them for all of the things that they're doing to make this possible.
Yes, thank you. Moving on our agenda, we have the North Dakota School Board Association Conference Overview. And I think we can just go around and talk about the different breakouts that we may have done. But I think first, if Jacob, if you would talk about the new board member training that you, go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it multiple times with different people, but Owen and I both appreciated that a lot of the new board member information we received was, I think, a lot of refresher from what Dr. Leck has given us to date via our new board member orientation that we do here. And I think that was greatly appreciated, seeing how not every district seemed to have that resource, and people ask questions that I think even Owen and I may have known the answer to already. But yeah, just a lot of reiteration of what we already knew, or seeing things in a different light was helpful from, you know, different superintendents to kind of incorporate different views of, I think, similar or the same policies.
Thank you. You're good? Would you like to add anything?
Well said.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you. And anyone else like to share any of the breakouts that they attended at all? Yep, Jason?
I guess it's worth mentioning that policy was a big part of the second day in Measure 4. Spent a lot of time in some of the details on Measure 4 that we don't need to hash out here on election eve, but I forget who the head of the Keep It Local Coalition,
Chad Oban,
was a big part of that presentation. So that was some good insight onto Measure 4 and what that could bring. Then, of course, is the legislative panel, which is always appreciated. And a lot of it did tie back to Measure 4 and what could possibly happen with that, and the biennium or the next legislative session, what some of the priorities might be. Very, very education-friendly, not only panel, but I think legislature, state. So again, depending on what happens with Measure 4, we'll see what lies ahead.
Thank you, Jason. Anyone else? Any other takers? Okay. All right. Thank you for those that were able to attend. Under Board Education, we have number 1, educational competency, the EduCal dashboard. Mr. Gaylor?
If I may, as Adam is getting ready, we linked these purposely. This board education and our strategic focus are linked together. They both relate to choice readiness. And so Mr. Gaylor may kind of jump from the dashboard right into our progress monitoring, because they are both related to choice ready. And this tool is a really amazing dashboard that's going to give our students and our parents an opportunity to progress monitor where they are in terms of choice ready. So.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Leck. So this is a combination presentation of our growth goal and that dashboard. And this growth goal was set at 90%, which you'll see as we look through our past evidence is definitely achievable. We prioritize this because, and the state of North Dakota prioritized this with the ESSA requirements. I'm not sure what year that came into place, but overall, it's an accountability framework that's supposed to look a little bit more well-rounded than what the federal accountability had looked like under No Child Left Behind. And so that framework helps guide not just Choice Ready, but also the new North Dakota scholarship that's in place. So I don't want to confuse this or convolute it too much, but just wanted to give you a little background on where it comes from. Choice Ready is part of our accountability framework. So at K-8, they don't have a Choice Ready component within that. They have just the student engagement surveys, our English learner proficiency, student growth, and student achievement as part of our ESSA and state accountability. At the high school, this comes into play with the Choice Ready framework. And the best way that I can explain it is essential skills are a must. And so, you know, if you don't have essential skills, if you remember Monopoly, you don't pass go, right? That's where we need to get every kid to. So they have to have a diploma. They're required to have a career or individual counseling session annually. They have to have a financial literacy course, pass North Dakota civics test. Now we have the cybersecurity requirement, which some of you will remember. We did an integration plan for JPS last spring with that. And then 4 of any of those other indicators, and I realize that's a long ways to be able to see that, so we'll have some slides that zoom in on it. Once you've passed go and you have your essential skills component met, then to be considered choice ready, you have to be ready in any 2 of those 3 categories on the bottom. You need to be post-secondary ready, workforce ready, or military ready. Any 2 of those will make you choice ready. Okay, so that gateway, again, the blue in the graphic and the blue here, those are the requirements that our students would absolutely need to meet. And then they have the option to meet any of those additional essential skills. So over time, we've had some strategies to be able to support that. Some of this data is student provided through a survey process. Some of it is pulled directly from PowerSchool, such as the attendance, or we have done a lot of work in the background linking courses that have capstone projects, for example, English 3 and English 4, our internship, our work-based learning. They have what meets that definition of a capstone project. Those things are actually linked in PowerSchool now, so all that data just flows in automatically for our students. And then multicultural awareness has to do with foreign language. More.
Easier for our students to meet the essential skills here because they're embedded into required classes. That isn't happening everywhere, and I want to give credit to the foresight of those, Mr. Gaylor and other staff that ensured that there was alignment between essential skills and our courses. So our students aren't trying to find out if they have met these skills. If they took English 3, they met those certain skills.
Yep. Yeah, we were. Yeah, our site-based leadership team, our counseling team, we were pretty intentional about what our strategies were to ensure our kids were choice ready, and put a lot of value into that process. And then that is hopefully going to yield results as well for the North Dakota Scholarship, which we didn't know at the time. We were just doing it because it was the right thing to do to try to get kids more well-rounded. Post-secondary ready, in that green section, you can see that there's 2 things that are required. You have to have at least a 2.8 GPA and a 4-year rolling plan, which is something that our counselors do beginning in 8th grade, really, and continuing on through their senior year, trying to help students plan their next 3 years that are ahead of them. They also, either have to have the minimum ACT, SAT requirements that are listed there in all of those sub-scores, or they have to have 2 or more additional indicators from below. And so when the board has done things like approve additional advanced placement courses or dual credit courses, our math pathways, those things were all also in reference with the requirements for post-secondary ready. Workforce ready is the area, as you'll see, that we score the highest of those categories. And you have to have that, again, for 4-year plan and 2 or more of those indicators. I think in the last couple of years, they've also added complete 3 world language courses into there to be workforce ready, and things like work-based learning that you've probably heard about from Mr. Wagon. That's a program that we have, and workplace learning experience, which is different. That's data that students fill out about their employment. And interesting, we have a lot of students that are employed. Military ready, you're required to have that 4-year plan, an ASVAB score of 31 or greater, quality citizenship, which is no expulsions or suspensions on your record, and physically fit, which is a performance in a PE class is how they calculate that. And you also have to be somewhat well-rounded, 2 or more indicators from either post-secondary or the workforce options. So now we're going to get into our results a little bit. You can see that essential skills starting back in 2021 and moving up through 23, 24. This is all from North Dakota Insights. In this particular graph, actually, Andy Dolan, who was an administrator at Fargo North and now works for Fargo Public Schools on the Choice Ready dashboard, helped pull this together really quickly. It's a nice color graphic. North Dakota Insights looks a little bit different. I'll show you those graphs as well. But you can see our essential skills, those strategies that we had in place to get students to make sure that they were meeting those essential skills, and that wasn't a barrier to them achieving Choice Ready. We got good results with that. Post-secondary ready has fluctuated up and down a little bit over the last few years. Workforce ready, we're really proud of that. A lot of kids involved in CTE and other experiences that also lead to workforce ready. Our military or life skills ready, they say life skills ready because there's a alternative choice ready for students that qualify for alternative choice ready. But for military ready, we saw a decline in that, and we'll talk a little bit about what plays into that and our strategy for the future with that. And then overall choice ready is a combination of how many students have met 2 or more of those indicators along with the essential skills. If you look at North Dakota Insights, there's a ton of information out there. This is the same type of information that you just saw in that previous graph, and you can see how that plays out over time. They also break it down a little bit more into demographics, and you can take a look at that on the North Dakota Insights page. I've just highlighted a few of those data points in the next few slides. You can see that we're increasing our number of students choice ready, but the big limiting factor for us has been that ASVAB score of 31. So we had 2 cohorts of students where they would have missed that ASVAB opportunity during COVID. We traditionally gave that as their 10th grade year. And so last year's students, as you can see in this graph, the 24 graduates, only 17% of them met that 31 indicator. Well, that happens to be about the same number of students that actually took the ASVAB. We had an opportunity for them to take that ASVAB again last spring, and we just didn't have much engagement in that. And so this year's seniors took that ASVAB opportunity last spring, and we have a high percentage of them that have now met that requirement. So that's where that gap was created. The class before had taken the ASVAB. That class took it as sophomores, and I believe that that was the class that our ASVAB coordinator, traditionally we wanted tables set up, and they said we just need bleachers, and they put kids in the bleachers with wooden slates to take a 3-hour test. And that's my theory anyway on why our achievement for that class of 23 was different than the previous engagement of that previous year. So we're working out those ASVAB issues. Last year they were able to coordinate taking that in the Civic Center, and our students did very well with that assessment, as we'll see in a little bit with our projections for this year's class. Post-secondary has steadily increased, but it's consistently lower than workforce ready, and we have some strategies moving forward for that as well. One of the things that you can break this down by demographic, you can see that really when it comes to essential skills, we don't have a lot of gaps demographically. Those intentional strategies that we had in place at the high school, incorporating capstone experiences in those courses, a lot of credit to those teachers that have done that. The CTE career ready practices, those are embedded in every CTE course, and teachers give feedback on career ready practices, which are like 21st century skills, and so that's how we're able to ensure students have met that requirement. For several years in a row, we did a full day of service, and now our clubs and activities are tracking that service through a platform called Interview, and encouraging students to meet that 25-hour service requirement. And then during the COVID years, some students had fully online courses, and we were able to count that through them interacting with our learning management system as completing an online course. And now we have the opportunity for students to take ND-CDE courses to meet that requirement as well. So those are really the 4 things that happened in that time frame to make that increase for essential skills. Post-secondary performance, you can see some gaps, particularly looking at our low income performance and post-secondary readiness, and that's something that we need to be concerned about, but it does parallel the other achievement metrics that we've looked at as a board as well, and that's just something we need to be aware of and have strategies for moving forward. We've increased AP opportunities. Many of you have been on the board when these new proposals came through. So that's AP Psych, AP Gov, AP Chem. We've increased our dual credit opportunities, and those are just a few of them that we are offering. We also have increased dual credit opportunities through online courses and in connection with our CTE programs. We adjusted our math pathways to try to push for more students to meet that post-secondary requirement of Algebra 2 readiness. Promoting fine arts and world language involvement has helped contribute to that post-secondary performance. And then one of the things that I think is holding us back from more post-secondary qualifications is that less students are taking the ACT, no longer required by the state of North Dakota for students to take that ACT. I think we would have a number of students that if they took it, that would meet those requirements that aren't currently. Workforce readiness, that's again a celebration for us with 99% of students. No real concerning or statistically significant disparities in that demographically either. We've increased CTE opportunities, promoted CTE career ready practices are also in that list for workforce ready. We've increased our work-based learning opportunities for students. So that includes not only going out to a job site, but it includes the simulated work-based learning like building the cabin with Mr. Thorson and building trades, or the simulated experience of restoring cars with Mr. Kubat. So those also count for work-based learning when they meet those requirements for the 40 hours. NDSA performance is included in Workforce Ready, and you can see that, as you guys have seen in our high school achievement scores, we have a strong performance in the North Dakota State Assessment, particularly in ELA. 3 world language courses, when that changed, that helped more students qualify for Workforce Ready as well. Sometimes they're in scheduling, you can only get so much into your schedule, and so some students are more interested in those world languages and aren't able to get the 2 CTE courses. So that's been a nice flexible option for kids as well. They can get credit for work keys. I think Mrs. Skunberg gave me the updated numbers. Last week we've had 26 students qualify for work keys with qualifying scores, and she anticipates quite a few more. And then dual credit also counts in Workforce Ready. And most of our students who take health from JPS or have their health credits with us, they get CPR and AED certification. So that's one of those technical certifications. Mrs. Eckert's been working pretty hard with our auto tech, auto collision to get ASE certification. We also, as we bring childcare on, want to get the center director certification for some of our students in that program. And so we're trying to add more of those certifications into our CTE program so more and more kids can qualify. I'm sorry I didn't mention on the bottom ribbon, those are things from our EduCal dashboard. So this would be actually Workforce Ready for estimates for our current class of students, where we have 87.9 of them that have taken 3 CTE courses, which is a huge celebration. This career ready practice isn't coming in right, so we need to check in on that because that should mirror the kids in the CTE courses. 40% of kids in this upcoming class have taken a dual credit course, 13.9, that's showing 24. I think the updated number is 26 and rising for work keys. Technical assessment, 107. Workplace learning, which is, have they held a job for the required hours? 73% of this year's seniors have had employment experience, which is, I think, another celebration. Work-based learning, meaning in their CTE class, do they have simulated or have they gone out to a work-based learning experience in the community, NDSA achievement, and then the 3 world languages. So I'll show you where that data comes from and we can look at that together. Here's the graph that I don't like to see, and probably that you guys don't like to see either, but that's the military readiness, and that was really drawn down by the ASVAB engagement, and we expect that to sharply increase again. So looking at projections for this year with the current class of 2025, that'll be back up to 124 of them, or around 70%, who are going to meet that minimum score of a 31. That'll have a huge impact on the number of students that qualify as military ready. Yeah. And this year's class, there was always an option to qualify in the North Dakota State Scholarship under the old model through last year's class. Now, ASVAB is pretty key, and we'll look at that when we get into the dashboard a little bit. But if they receive that minimum score of a 50, now all of a sudden you're hitting military ready on the scholarship, which is higher than the 31 just to be choice ready. So again, overall choice ready performance, you can see some gaps in there that we'd like to shore up. Demographically, low income students are qualifying choice ready at a lower rate. Most of them parallel each other throughout the years. There's a large increase in in the all others category. And then there's some categories that were not reported in previous years, mostly because we didn't have a large enough number for it to show up on North Dakota Insights. And so those are things that we're going to keep paying attention to and keeping track of. Challenges and next steps. Overall, in meeting that 90% metric, we need to maintain our focus on those essential skills. We can't lose sight of those intentional strategies to make sure kids are qualifying there. Respond to those disparities for low-income students and post-secondary readiness. Promote engagement in more rigorous courses for all students to get that post-secondary number up and have kids more ready to pursue that as a choice. Workforce readiness, we got to maintain what we've got in place, increase our NDSA performance, world language performance. That'll catch that few number of students that aren't meeting that workforce readiness. And then the ASVAB shift to juniors, and as Dr. Leck said, more communication on the choice ready framework I think will help. So I've got a recommended action, but I've also got a follow-up presentation on just kind of showing that EduCal dashboard a little bit more. I don't know if we want to pause now or just go through that, and then the board can decide if they want to act on that progress monitoring report. Sure. Okay. All right. So this again started quite a few years ago. There was a collaboration between 5 other districts, including JPS, to basically create this choice-ready dashboard, led initially by Fargo Public Schools, who had built some semblance of it. And then we got a lot of other schools involved. It was a really good process to try to both talk to schools about what their strategies were to get more students choice-ready, but then also to be consistent on things like everything from attendance practices to how you're coding classes to what counts for what. And so that was a long process to get that up and rolling. In 2023, we saw the first dashboard data pulls, and we had to spend a lot of time cleaning up the data and making sure all the things on the back end are feeding into this dashboard. Last year, Lead Home Technologies, who's kind of in charge of creating this, added the scholarship eligibility criteria in there. And then this is the first year that we'll be rolling that out to students and parents at JHS. So here's kind of what it looks like. We will be able to get there through a PowerSchool link, or students just use their single sign-on to be able to access it. For parents, the PowerSchool link will be really nice. Otherwise, you're kind of doing the over-the-shoulder with your child's login. So it just mirrors that exact same choice-ready platform. It's got check boxes to show whether students met those criteria or not, and you can just really quickly look through and see what a student has. Some of the data is collected from PowerSchool, which when the state updates to Infinite Campus, and we don't have a timeline on that, there's going to be a lot of rework and figuring out how does that data migrate, how does that data system integrate with a platform like this. So we'll just have to do that work over again. The students actually fill out a survey we've been collecting this in a face-to-face meeting with our counselors in the past, and so we've been putting all of that data in. Now we think we've got a pretty good template so that our students can just fill that survey out and check those boxes, and then Dorothy Lowinger in our counseling office verifies and vets that information to if there's any follow-up that we need from students. So this is, again, a look at that. It's going to be easier to see when we actually get into the platform. So there's a student survey. There's a data validation process. Our counselors are going to be able to use this dashboard for planning, and we will have a parent access to see that as well. So I think if it still left me logged in here, and these are fake students, so it's our actual student data, but they just create fake names, so Charlotte Watson fake. Those are, we're able to see our 2024 data in this, and I'm going to actually zoom out a little bit, but I'm going to take a look at a couple of students. So we can pick any of these students. Oh. And I think I saved my credentials so you guys don't have to watch me suffer to, and I still have it set up so it's fake students. Let's go back to 2024 and click on Choice Ready. So the student and parent platform won't have all these options because this is a administrative version. They're only going to be able to see their particular child in there. And all right, so yeah, we've still got the fake kids in there. You can see our actual 2024 data in this ribbon across the top. So if you want to break it down into, you know, how many students completed online learning, and for that class it was 100%. If you want to see how many got the 2.8 GPA, you can do that. You can do some searching within those boxes for, so you can just highlight the true students and then export them into a different spreadsheet if you really want to get into any of the details on it. So it's a pretty sophisticated platform to be able to look at our results in here. When I click on an individual student, you can see as I'm scrolling through, it shows me this student is choice ready. And so if I click on that student, it's going to show us how did that student meet those choice ready requirements. They've got their diploma. This student actually has all of those boxes checked in essential skills. They met post-secondary ready through ACT scores, and they also met 2 or more indicators in post-secondary ready. They met workforce ready because they had CTE courses and dual credit and a technical assessment and a workplace learning experience, and they met the minimum ACT scores. And then this student did not meet military ready because they didn't take the ASVAB, but based on their ACT scores likely would have had they taken the ASVAB. So that's a fake student name, but it's an actual student result. If I click the scholarship ready tab, we can search for students in that as well. And we could go to this current year and look at our student results here. Oh, helps if you click all the right boxes. So currently projecting in this year's class, which there's still a lot of data to be entered, 18 students who are meeting that scholarship ready category on there. So if we look at one of them, you notice it's got the choice ready sign and the $sign in it. This is for the $6,000 state scholarship. So North Dakota High School Diploma isn't checked for this student. They haven't graduated yet. And as soon as that's checked in PowerSchool, it updates nightly to be able to do that. This student, again, has exceeded our expectations, has almost all the categories met except for 2 years in extracurricular. Here's the difference. You need that super score or composite score for ACT of a 24, and then you need that and the 2 or more indicators in the scholarship, in the post-secondary ready, workforce ready. That student did not meet workforce ready. So you could look at as a student and say, if I completed maybe a 3rd world language course, would I meet one of those criteria to be workforce ready as well? It doesn't matter, they're already scholarship ready, but you can see how this could be a really useful planning tool for, particularly for our freshmen, juniors, or sophomores and juniors as they're planning out their course schedule to make sure that they're meeting all those components. And as they're planning, what activities am I going to get involved in? How can I enhance my ability? What assessments do I need to take? And then this student has an ASVAB score of 50 or greater, physical fitness, and they also met 2 or more indicators from post-secondary or workforce ready, so they're military ready. That's how they just earned $6,000. And as more kids take the work keys and they get their surveys filled out for meeting essential skills, they get updated scores. Dorothy Lauinger does a lot of back-end work putting in all those ACT scores when they come in, all those ASVAB scores, all those work keys scores, and then that nightly updates in this platform so that parents and students will have access to be able to see how they're doing on choice ready metrics and on scholarship readiness. Okay, I think I'd stand for any questions you guys have about the dashboard, the choice ready report, anything. I know that was a lot.
I'd just add, as a senior parent, I wish the dashboard had been active and live for me. I spent a lot of time in the last 6 months plotting out, and I think Mr. Gaylor wishes we would have had it too, because I asked a lot of questions. And well, what if this? And does this meet or does this count? Where did this essential skill come from? And so having this as a parent, I'm really looking forward to being able to share this with parents, to be able to help their children or their students make informed decisions and understand the implications of not taking the ASVAB, for example, or what is the ACT? Why do I need to score this, or why should I do that? Why do I need to take that 3rd world language? Why do I need to do those things? This helps because it is a direct path to that North Dakota scholarship. And I think you've seen through a lot of the career ready, the choice ready practices already that are embedded into school. Our students have a pretty distinct advantage to being able to achieve that choice ready scholarship. So I think it's really going to be the North Dakota State Scholarship. It's a really nice planning tool for our kids and also for their parents. Moving forward, this has been a really good thing. The dashboard developed in concert with other districts. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but that was a Choice Ready grant that we wrote that helped to pay for this.
All Choice Ready grants to this point and paid through this year.
Yeah.
And then there's a minimal fee per student that we'll have to continue to maintain to have access to.
Yeah, so a benefit to our students really at no cost from the general fund because it's been grant funded. The development all the way through this point.
Any other questions? So thank you, Mr. Gaylor, for, go ahead.
Just real quick, the dashboard is accessible to parents, students, and counseling staff. That's not what teachers would need access to, correct?
I don't know if they have accounts or not. I'd have to ask Mr. Dolan, but I know our counselors do. I can add anybody that is interested. If you're interested, Jason, we can.
I guess the point of my question was, it seems like a great way that parents could get a very quick snapshot, obviously, of the longer plan, and maybe not get muddled up in some power school things. So that was my question: is if teachers will be inputting anything? It doesn't sound like it.
No, nope.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylor, for presenting our letter E on our agenda, strategic focus for the growth and learning goal 5 for us this evening. Is there a motion for approval for this? Motion by Jamie. Is there a second? Second by Dan. A motion and a second for approval of strategic focus for growth and learning, number 5. Any discussion? Aaron?
So yeah, this is an example here. We have the strategic target of 90%. Our current status is 72%. We're provided some challenges and next steps and some interventions on what we're going to do to raise that bar. I think it would be helpful to, not just assess this from a qualitative standpoint on, how we're going to try to bridge that gap, but get to more of a quantitative so we can understand which of these actions, what are they going to impact, and by approximately how much we expect that impact to result in. You mentioned the ASVAB several times, the 17% on the military. If we were to do that, what level of impact would that have then on achieving the goal that we're looking for? So when we're missing that target, have an idea of how successful do we think we're going to get? Do we think we're going to get to 90%? We're still going to be short, but this is what we can do with the resources that we have available.
Thank you, Aaron.
So I guess it's more of a, I like what's being put in front of us, but it's like I think, future improvements on when we do the presentation of the progress monitoring.
Right. Thanks for the feedback, Aaron. Yeah, and some of this is you're exactly right. This is where we're at right now, but we also need to, in the next 4 years, see where we're moving towards. So, thank you. Any other questions or comments? So you have a motion, a second, for approval of the strategic focus for growth and learning goal number 5. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on the agenda, under the superintendent's report, Dr. Leck.
Thank you. You have my written report. The first item, a change order request. So we've included and returned that tracking spreadsheet. So you have a sense of what those change orders are for. They'll be later on in your agenda. And then that tracking spreadsheet to help you understand where we are at in terms of our contingency balance. The NDCEL and NDSBA conference, I always appreciate, I like October. It's a very busy month, but it's a professional learning month for me. I get a lot of opportunities to attend NDCEL, NDSBA, the school law seminar, and I think they're great opportunities to build our capacity as leaders, whether you're a school board member, whether you're a building administrator. I appreciate those opportunities. JPS historically has tried to provide a session in one of those conferences. I just think it's a professional obligation that we have to share some of the knowledge and things that we have done, not just take, but giving a little bit in those. This year, we partnered with Vital Network, and I shared the breakout session that we provided on engaging staff and gathering perspectives. Later on, I think it's in December, you'll see the progress monitoring on our Vital surveys. So you'll get a chance to see where we're moving in that direction, but this gives you a snapshot. On, I think it was last Tuesday, we met with District 12 and 29 legislators. We spent about 2 hours at JVCTC. It was a great meeting. I'm very appreciative. We had a really good turnout from our legislators, and even those that couldn't come or that weren't there tried to make it work. And so we didn't have everybody, but we had most everybody from those 2 districts there, very engaged, very willing to hear out what our concerns are. And I kind of referenced what we discussed during that time. So we had all of our District 12 legislators and those that are running for District 12 office. And then we also had Don Bigasoff from District 29 were able to attend. Along with myself, Dr. Larson was present, Mr. Gaylor and Mrs. Eckert were able to share our perspectives. But we spent a lot of time talking about the child care program. I wanted to reinforce to them what Mr. Gaylor and Mrs. Eckert had referenced before. Without the RWIP grant and their expansion of the RWIP grant to schools, we wouldn't be talking about a child care facility. And I wanted to make sure that they recognized how important that work was and that shift was to schools. And that there's direct relation to that change that they made and real benefits in our district, in their legislative district. They were very excited, had a lot of questions about the child care program, and they were pretty impressed with what we were doing. We had some very serious discussions about recent changes in the last two legislative sessions about juvenile justice change. There was pretty significant shifts away from juvenile justice to what they call CHINS, Child in Needs of Services. I wrote CHIN there, but it should be CHINS. That referral process and how it's impacting JPS, we sent a pretty clear message that some shifts needs to happen there. There needs to be greater capacity building in our human service zones. They made changes with all the best of intentions, but public schools are seeing the impact of that shift, and they have to capacity build there more, or they need to help us reinforce what we then need to do in schools if there isn't capacity in those human service zones or through juvenile justice, because right now we are filling that gap in public education, and I gave some examples of the things that we've had to do without additional funding from the state. We've had to decide, well, our kids need additional alternative programming, so we do that. Our students need more counseling supports, so we do that. We add an additional counselor at a cost to the district. We add certified mental health, behavioral health counseling, clinical counseling. Those are things that we add. We aren't provided revenue for those things to happen, but if we're going to be expected to fill those gaps, they're going to have to start thinking about how they're funding schools, because every dollar we divert there is diverted from somewhere else. And so we need to make sure that we have the capacity to do the jobs that we're being asked to do. We shared that there's some recent legislation. It was one of the highlighted top bills that I talked about last session, which was in the virtual learning bill. And there was an interpretation of that bill after legislation was passed that related to NDCDE. It has had a huge impact on schools, and it's a requirement to provide NDCDE courses even if we offer that course. So that impact to our budget is about $63,000 annually, and almost half of those classes are already provided. So we provide an offering for those classes, and we're providing a duplicative offering. So we could have, just as an example, we could have 5 sections offered of Algebra 2, but if one student wants an online course, we have to provide that, even though there's an opportunity to take that throughout the day. We're seeing a duplication of about half of that cost, of that $63,000, and we would like to see them address that and not allow that duplicative opportunity. We discussed the recommendations from the Teacher Recruitment and Retention Task Force. In particular, we talked about how we can encourage those individuals that are in education to stay. What are the drivers for those individuals to stay, and how can we get more interest in young people in the profession? So we talked a few different strategies there. We also talked about the work that a legislative group, the School Choice Task Force, is working on. We talked about some pending recommendations there, and then what we saw as potential solutions to those. And of course, no discussion with legislators would be complete if we don't talk about the funding formula and what recommendations we can make along those lines as well. But again, I was so appreciative of our legislators. They really came and listened and heard what we were sharing and our concerns, asked great questions, and I was very, very appreciative of the time that they gave us. The Community Committee for Facilities, we also met last week. That was a busy day. That was a couple of things I'm going to reference are all on Tuesday. The Community Committee for Facilities, I've referenced the members that are there. We did a tour of Lincoln and Washington. We looked through, at least I provided the task force or the group with a lot of different resources that have helped bring us to the point that we're at. We're going to come back in our next meeting and start talking about questions, what more information is needed. And so we've got a great start there with that task force on Measure 4. or the last in our series of Measure 4, I thought we would talk about the impact on local communities. And this was also on Tuesday. I was on a radio show talking about, on KFGO, talking about the impact of Measure 4. So like I said, that for me got to be a pretty full morning on that Tuesday. But one of the things that I think it's really important that we think about with the impact on local communities, or maybe one of the frustrations that I've had with the discussion around Measure 4, is I feel that we need to talk about what it is. There has been times in which the measure is either oversimplified or there's, I hesitate to use the word scare tactics, but misrepresentations of what would happen. And I think that erodes the trust in the dialogue of what we need to be having about Measure 4. And so when I say the oversimplification, I mean what I've talked about in the past, where we're saying, oh, that's elimination of property tax. It's not what it is. Well, it's elimination of property tax based on value. And I think that difference matters because what that tells me is that that becomes a transfer tax. There's a transfer of one shift that's $3.15 billion. That's not going to come from nowhere. That's not going to come straight from the legacy fund. It has to come from somewhere. So where is that going to come from? If $1 billion of that is out-of-state corporations, where's that $1 billion going to come from? There's conversations that I think are really important, and if we oversimplify it and say it's eliminating property tax, and that's all it is, I think that's the wrong way to look at this, because that isn't what it is. On the other side, I don't like when I hear things like, well, if we pass it, if Measure 4 happens, there's not going to be any rural fire departments anymore. There's not going to be any. That's not accurate. That's not. We need to stop using that kind of rhetoric because it isn't true. What would happen is you'd set that standard by 2024 levels. I think it's fair to say, well, what would that look like in 2030? What would that look like in 2034? That's a fair question. You know, and I think there's legitimate concerns about what's going to happen in the long term. But to say that those things wouldn't exist, emergency services wouldn't exist, law enforcement wouldn't exist, rural fire wouldn't exist, that isn't what it is. And we need to stop talking about that rhetoric, or it takes us away from the real dialogue of what we need to have. And so the impact of local communities, what I do think would happen if Measure 4 were to pass is you'd become even more reliant on one commodity, on the energy industry. We've seen that in schools, what happens because we are a more heavily reliant than any other political subdivision on the state. So if 100% of that comes from the state, we become 100% beholden to what happens in Bismarck. They decide 100% what we get to do from a year-to-year perspective. That's going to be impacted, and I think we need to understand that. We know that more than most in schools because we've been that mechanism for tax relief in the past. And I said this on the radio show too, and I want to give credit to our legislators. I've heard one of the pieces of rhetoric I've heard is, well, we need to show the legislators in Bismarck that they need to do something. Man, they've tried. You can make the argument that they haven't done the right things. You can make the argument they haven't done enough. You can make the argument that their plans have been incomplete, but you can't say that they haven't tried property tax reform. Schools are a great example of that. You know, the difference is, you know, over $1,000 on a $100,000 home to about $465 for schools' portion of taxes over time. You can't say that they haven't done anything, and when I hear that, I feel like that's missing part of the issue. Now, are there other things that need to be worked on? Absolutely, and I think the legislature is getting that message, but it's not accurate to say they haven't done anything. I think in the long term, though, you can look at what the impact for political subs would be, and specifically in Jamestown, we've already seen that reliance on the state revenue. That has me concerned because when we get 2%, in the past when we got a 0% or a 1% or a 2%, we've had local taxation to help us fill that gap if it hasn't been enough to do what we want to do locally. We wouldn't have that capacity to do that anymore. That means other changes would have to happen in our budget. That's the only way that would work. I also have concerns about recruitment and retainment of employees, not just in schools, but in political subs. When you look at the PERS changes that have already happened, and then if you look at an inability to have competitive wage, those are two whammies for political subs that have to be considered. With that, I'm going to just stand for questions. I've had a lot of opportunity to have conversation about Measure 4 in the last 5 meetings. I just want to pause if there's any questions about Measure 4 or anything else that we feel we're gapped out on and that we want to educate ourselves on.
Any questions for Dr. Leck?
Okay. A board retreat, historically we've had a board retreat in January, or at least we've had one per year. It's often been in January. And I believe if we're, we have an anticipated work date to be completed for the community committee by December. So it would be my hope that we could have a board retreat. So I'll just lay that foundation for that discussion, and in a future meeting, if that is the wish of the board, we could set a board retreat. And that would be my recommended day, would be January 6th. And the last thing I have before I pause for more questions, just in our spotlight, wanted to recognize Mr. Rohr. One of our board members has been appointed by Governor Burgum to serve on the State Board of Public School Ed. So he'll represent our county along with Burley, Eddy, Foster, Kidder, McLean, Sheridan, and Wells County on the board. I love when we have representatives from Jamestown serve on state boards and provide state leadership, whether that's our teachers writing standards. We have teachers serving on the State Teacher of the Year committee. We have teachers serving on different engagements. I know Mr. Rohr serves on an engagement task force, whether that's serving on North Dakota School Boards Association or NDCEL. We have a lot of staff and leaders in our district serving on state roles, and that provides a greater level of influence for our Jamestown district. The more people that we have that serve on these types of boards. So recognition for Mr. Rohr, and a thank you for serving. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions on the remainder of the superintendent's report? Okay. Yes, Owen.
I had one about the community committee. I think last time we met, you mentioned that there was about 40 people that applied for that. So I was just wondering if there was any plan to kind of keep folks that didn't make the cut to say, to keep them engaged or involved as things.
Yeah, we did have discussion about that, and what was really difficult, we were heavily weighted in some schools more than others, and so to provide a cross-reference, we couldn't have, 6 parents from Gusner. That doesn't make a good community committee. And so, yes, we talked, and we'll talk more at the community committee about how we want to engage and communicate that out with everybody that applied, and the community in general. Not just those that applied, but the community at large.
Any other questions? Aaron.
Just in regards to the board retreat, I guess I would like to get a date set sooner rather than later, and I guess an agenda of topics that we'd want to cover in that. So I don't if this is the appropriate venue here to kind of hash through that, or if we want to make some tentative plans for that. But it is November already, and January's not that far away.
Yep, we'll make sure that we're available that day, and also start, some of the facilities, of course, discussion will be on there. And if there's other topics that we can certainly talk about if we want to handle that at the retreat or at a different time as well. So if you have some agenda items also at the end of the agenda here, we always ask that, but you can either let Dr. Leck or myself know for that as well. So. Any other questions or comments?
Just a response to that, I plan on including setting that on our next agenda.
Yeah.
And so if we can think about if that date works, or if a different date would be better, and then agenda topics send them my way like we have with other retreats.
Yep, very good. Anything else? Okay. If not, moving on our agenda. Nothing under old business. Under new business, nothing under activities. Under buildings and grounds, we have approval of change orders for JVCTC childcare project number 1, change order number 4, safety filament transfer grills, and change order number 5, floor leveling. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron, is there a second by Steve? We have a motion, a second for approval of change orders for JVCTC childcare projects number 1, change order number 4, and number 2, change order number 5. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Nothing under curriculum, assessment, instruction, nothing under finance or operations. Under personnel, approval of superintendent formative evaluation. So what I'll be looking for from the board on this is a motion for satisfactory or a motion for unsatisfactory for each of the 6 sections. So just to start with that, Christy will do roll call when you're, but I'm also going to have a few more comments prior to that. So I did meet with Dr. Leck last week, and we spent about an hour going through the superintendent evaluations. We even talked a little bit about our school board agenda flow and those kinds of things. And I'll just kind of make a few comments under each section. I do appreciate the board's comments because that sometimes does drive different discussion points. So I really appreciate that. And under the first one, under the goal and vision setting, I think here is an example where over the last couple of evaluations, the board has given very specific feedback and clear expectations for Dr. Leck to follow through, and so I think that was noticeable. Our strategic plan does align with our district needs. We're doing progress monitoring. It was the board, the committee, continuous improvement, and the superintendent worked through this. I think it's a good product, and I think we've made some real progress here. The district has, and as far as Dr. Leck's role in this, I think, like I said, that's a great example of some very clear instructions and what the board really wanted to see with the feedback that they provided. So that was, I think, a good discussion on that. Number 2, board relations. I think there's a good score overall. I think we see Dr. Leck working with board members and committees, including the strategic planning committee. There were some comments about agenda items and the timeliness. It's probably a good time to mention that when Amy sends out the email that the agenda's ready, that is the finalized product with all the links connected. Earlier in the week, things start populating in the folder, like as early as Monday or Tuesday. We even talked about some of the committee minutes could even be, soon after they're ready and being in there even a little sooner than that. So it is something that he'll work to get that out sooner. The agenda itself may not be ready. The completed agenda with all the links may not be completed any sooner necessarily, but the pieces will be there for board members to start preparing earlier on that. So human resource management, number 3, I think there's lots of positive developments here. Working with the communications committee, we have a lot of things that are in the works that positively impact human resource management. We heard about the child care pieces. We have a parental leave policy. This is in policy. It's not really part of other negotiated agreements or those kinds of things. Those are policy things that are all positive things for human resource management. So we also reestablished a new PD committee. So those are just a few things that we discussed under that area. Number 4, curriculum and student support services. I am pleased to see that our strategic plan does take into account the whole child, engagement, behavioral support, belonging. We've added counselors and increase in social emotional support. So there's lots of good things happening here under that area. Under community relations, as we had a good conversation about this, Dr. Leck shared with me that he'd like to be more involved in the community. I think he also rated very high in this area, but time is a constraint, and he mentioned that, I took a note that he tries to go as many things as he can. Obviously, a legislative year this year is going to be busier with other involvements at the state, which we do appreciate also. And then one thing that I get comments on when I visit with people from other communities is that his involvement and his mentorship within our state. So when we look at a larger community, as well as he is accessible to families and our community. If someone wants to talk with him or speak with him or leave a message, he is accessible. So those are things in our community relations that I thought were really positive. And to continue to work on operations and resource management. I guess as we move forward with the meetings and facilities, looking at our facilities, there's a lot of time and effort that's been put into this, and there's lots more to come in this area as well. So those are just the notes I had taken, and just wanted to share that with the board. And I think overall, like I said, there's some things I see where the board has given some very specific feedback, and Dr. Leck also appreciates the very specific feedback that's very clear, so that he can do his job better. And so that's just something else I wanted to relate to the board. And then the discussion points are also helpful to me as I go through his evaluation. So moving on in this piece, we're going to, again, like I said, I'm going to be looking for a motion of satisfactory or a motion for unsatisfactory rating for each of the 6 areas. And so I'll read the area, and then someone from the board can motion. And then Christy will do roll call for each area. And we don't do an overall, it's just each of the six areas. So the first area is goal and vision setting with a rating of 3.56. A motion and a second for a motion of satisfactory rating for goal and vision setting 3.56. Any discussion? If not, roll call vote, Christina.
Jamie Bear? Yes. Heidi Larson?
Yes.
Jason Rohr?
Yes.
Jacob Meyer?
Yes.
Dan Tweeten?
Yes.
Aaron Roberts? Stephen Belkamp? Melissa Gleason? Owen McKenna?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Yes. Okay. Area number 2, board relations with a rating of 3.57.
I move for satisfactory rating under board relations with a score of 3.57.
We have a motion by Jason for satisfactory, second by Dan for satisfactory rating, board relations 3.57. Any discussion? If not, Christy, roll call.
Heidi Larson?
Yes.
Jason Rohr?
Yes.
Jacob Meyer?
Yes.
Dan Tweeten?
Yes.
Aaron Roberts? Stephen Belkamp? Melissa Gleason? Owen McKenna?
Yes.
Jamie Bear? Unanimous.
Approved. So approval for satisfactory rating for 1 and 2. Human resource management with a rating of 3.44. Is there a motion? Motion by Jamie. Second by Owen. We have a motion and a second for a satisfactory rating for the area of human resource management with a 3.44 score. Any discussion? If not, Christy, roll call vote.
Jason Rohr?
Yes.
Jacob Meyer?
Yes.
Dan Tweeten?
Yes.
Aaron Roberts? Steve Belkamp? Melissa Gleason? Owen McKenna?
Yes.
Jamie Bear? Heidi Larson?
Yes. Unanimous approval for satisfactory reading. In area number 4. Number 5, community relations with a rating of 3.40. Is there a motion? Oh, do I have to go back to 4? Oh,
Yep.
did I miss one?
Mhm.
Oh, 4. Curriculum. Number 4, curriculum and student support services 3.33. Is there a motion of satisfactory or unsatisfactory rating for this area?
I would move for satisfactory rating of 3.31 under section 4 curriculum and student support services.
There's a motion for satisfactory reading for area number 4. Is there a second? Second by Dan. We have a motion, a second for satisfactory reading in the area of curriculum and student support services. Any discussion? If not, Christie, roll call vote.
Jacob Meyer. Dan Tweeten. Aaron Roberts. Steve Veldkamp. Melissa Gleason. Owen McKenna. Jamie Bear. Heidi Larson.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Approval for number 4 for satisfactory rating. Number 5, now we get to 5. Community relations with a rating of 3.40. Is there a motion for satisfactory or unsatisfactory rating in this area? A motion by Aaron for satisfactory rating, second by Jason. We have a motion, a second for satisfactory rating for area of community relations. Any discussion? If not, Christie, roll call.
Dan Tweeten. Aaron Roberts. Steve Veldkamp. Melissa Gleason. Owen McKenna. Jamie Bear. Heidi Larson.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Jacob Meyer. Unanimous.
Yep. Approval for satisfactory rating for community relations, area number 5. The last area is number 6, operations and resource management with a rating of 3.72. Is there a motion for satisfactory or unsatisfactory rating in this area?
We submit a satisfactory rating for operations and resource management for 3.73.
Is it 3? Did I read that wrong? Okay. 3.73. We have a motion by Dan and a second by Steve for a motion, a second for operations and resource management. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, Christie, roll call vote.
Steve Veldkamp. Melissa Gleason. Owen McKenna. Jamie Bear. Heidi Larson.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Jacob Meyer. Dan Tweeten. Aaron Roberts. Unanimous.
Motion for approval of satisfactory rating for area number 6. All right. And the last comments are, as we went through this, there might be a few areas we might want to tweak it to align a little more with our strategic plan as well. And so we can, for our one in March, we can maybe look to that or create maybe a task force to kind of review it. Is that something the board would be interested? We've talked about it a little bit off and on. Aaron?
Yeah, I'd support a task force, so the
Okay.
separate committee just kind of scrub through that and bring a recommendation in.
Okay, sounds good. And so if someone would like to serve on that task force, you can just let me know and we can get that moving forward and then just bring it, the end result back to the board for review. So, okay. All right, thank you. And comment?
Just thank you to kind of reiterate one of the things that Dr. Larson said. I really, I like to see the scores, but the written feedback is what really helps me improve. It's very, I found when the more explicit that is, the better, the more information I have. And I want the feedback to continue to grow and improve. And it makes me feel better when I have that specific feedback that I can kind of anchor onto, so I can, like I said, continue to improve. I always appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for continuing this opportunity for me.
Thank you for serving your district. Under policies and procedures, we have 3 policies under approval of amended policies. Dr. Luck, did you want to make a comment on these before we move into those?
I did. Had I thought enough about, I knew where all of these policies came from, but I got a lot of questions related to these policies and what was the impetus behind them. So I wish I had had the foresight to think of that. I would have communicated that differently. But the ACF policy is a Cognia policy that came directly from our North Dakota School Board Association Policy Services. Because we're having a Cognia review, we wanted to make sure that all of our Cognia policies were up to date. That's where that policy comes from. It isn't tied to anything in particular other than just that Cognia review. And the BA policies, so school board ethics regulation and board member internet and social media use, I actually had the most questions on this from staff. I had different staff ask questions, what's happening here? What is the rationale behind this policy? And again, I wish I had the foresight to think about that and how that might be perceived. But those that have attended school law seminars in the past know that this is a direct, in direct relation. This is also a School Boards Association policy, but it's in direct relation to case law that's come up at the federal level, through to the Supreme Court related to what constitutes potential open meeting violations, and that social media can be that avenue for open meetings. And so different laws associated when that becomes, open public dialogue. And so this policy or these recommendations for board regulations just govern what best practice would be to ensure that that does not occur. So nothing in particular that's driving this other than case law and, the evolution of social media. So I just wanted to clarify those two things.
All right, thank you. Would we like to, if there's a motion, we can do all three of them at the same time, unless you'd like to do them separately. Dan? There's a motion to approve policies number 1 through 3. Is there a second? Second by Jamie. So you have a motion and a second for approval of ACF, BA-BR1, and BA-BR2. Any discussion? Jacob?
I did have a question about BA-BR2. One of the changes in point 5 is that not to speak on behalf of the board, even being delegated authority to do so on social media. Just think that that's a main way that our society communicates these days, that if we kind of pigeonhole ourselves to not be able to use social media, for the benefit of the board, that might be something to consider, especially with upcoming potential referendums and things like that.
Yeah, and these are not my policy recommendations. They're School Boards Association policy recommendations for your consideration. I certainly understand that point. Like I said, I believe what was driving this policy recommendation from legal counsel with School Boards Association just relates to case law and how that's been interpreted in political, those in serving political subs have been placed in situations in which they're using social media in a way that that makes those social media avenues open meetings, which has created different issues for those individuals.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second for approval of amended policies ACF, BA-BR1, and BA-BR2. Any further discussion? Yep. There being no further discussion, we will do a roll call vote. Christy?
Melissa Gleason? Yes. Owen McKenna?
Yes.
Jamie Bear?
Yes.
Heidi Larson?
Yes.
Jason Rohr?
Yes.
Jacob Meyer?
Yes.
Dan Tweeten?
Yes.
Aaron Roberts?
No.
Steve Veldkamp?
7 to 1. Okay. Motion approved. Number 8, tuition. Approval of tuition agreements. Number 1, 6th grade student to attend Medina Public Schools for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jason. We have a motion and a second for approval of tuition agreement for a 6th grade student to attend Medina Public School for the 2024 to 2025 school year. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Nothing under 9 other. Items for future agenda. Does the board have any items for future agenda at this time? And also note that with the retreat coming up, you can also either let us know now or send Dr. Leck or myself any items that you may want to see on those agendas as well. Okay. Under meetings to be scheduled, we have a new board member orientation on Monday, November 18th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. in the district office conference room. Oh, yep.
If I may, we just talked about this at orientation. We will not be having that orientation because it coincides with our Cognia review. So we aren't going to have the 18th onboarding.
Okay. All right. And Otherwise, we have a school board meeting on Monday, November 18th, 2024 at 5:30 PM in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. And I believe we're having a finance committee meeting on November 12th at 5, are we having 5:15? Yep, 5:15 PM in the district office conference room. Are there any other meetings that are to be scheduled or need to be scheduled? Okay, that we missed. Okay. Under monthly superintendent evaluation, we have Section 2, Board Relations, and Section 5, Community Relations. There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.